Hello everybody, my name is Lokajerji, and today I'm going to be going over the origin of all the licensed killer perks. I'll explain what the perk represents for the character and try and link the quotes from which series it's from. Let's get into it. Starting off, I'm going to be looking at Sadako or the Onryo from the Ringu series, and then cover the rest of the killers as the video goes on. Her first perk is Call of Brine. In the icon, we see the Onryo staring with one eye. This is a reference to how Sadako kills her victims in the Ringu movies. We also see this whenever Shimori is a survivor. The perk also refers to Sadako's ability to utilize and alter technology in supernatural ways. As we all know, she uses TVs to manifest herself in the Ringu films, and it's also her primary power in Dead by Daylight. Her next perk is Floods of Rage. This is an interesting one, as I believe it refers to the entity's agreement with Sadako, and how they have a psychic connection with each other. The name Floods of Rage is probably referencing the ocean-like themes we see throughout the Ringu films, and how in the lore it states, her wrath was like the tides of a stormy sea. Her final perk is Merciless Storm. In the icon we see Sadako standing in the rain with what I believe is the entity's claws surrounding her, which again could be referencing her connection with the entity. This perk also refers to Sadako's significant trauma she experienced, and now those who join her in the trial also feel it. For those who are unfamiliar, Sadako was injured and then thrown down a well, which is probably what this perk is referring to as trauma throughout the film. Next, I'll be looking at Pinhead, or the Cenobite from the Hellraiser movie series. His first perk is Gift of Pain. The icon is referring to Pinhead's use of chains to attack his victims, which is very prevalent both in the movies and in Dead by Daylight. It could also potentially be referencing Pinhead's Mori, where chains attack the survivors similarly to the icon art. The whole theme of the perk is referring to Pinhead's role to dispense pain and pleasure as a demon. This quote, said by Pinhead, is from this scene in Hellraiser.
We'll tear your soul apart.
His next perk is Plaything. This perk refers to how Pinhead almost toys with his victim's suffering. In the icon we can see a person being blinded by chains, which I believe is just a reference to both Pinhead's chain power and the oblivious status effect caused by this perk. This quote, said by Pinhead, can be heard in this scene.
You solved the box. We came. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasures.
His final perk is Deadlock. This perk is a reference to the mental suffering Pinhead causes to his victims. A good example of this is Kirsty Cotton ending up in a mental hospital. In the icon we see Pinhead looking down on a generator blocked by chains, which is of course another reference to his powers. This quote here is from this scene in Hellraiser.
He escaped you!
Nobody escapes us.
Next up we have Freddy Krueger, or the Nightmare from A Nightmare on Elm Street. His first perk is Fire Up. I believe this one is a reference to a couple of things. One is Freddy's death when he was a human. In the film he was burned alive by the parents of Bad in preschool. And I also believe it references Freddy's extremely fiery personality, and how losing his prey fills him with anger, because as we know, Quentin escaped the grasp of Freddy Krueger many times throughout the film, which in turn made him extremely angry. His next perk is Remember Me. I believe this one is referencing Freddy's obsession with Nancy Holbrook throughout the story. In the icon we also see Freddy's knifed glove, and the way it's danced could be referencing to Freddy's attack cooldown animation in Dead by Daylight. The perk name could also be referencing the line, Remember Me, Freddy says to his victims.
Are you?
Remember me.
The fact that this perk does not affect the obsession, I believe is referencing how Freddy was not aggressive to Nancy Holbrook in particular throughout the film, because she's his obsession compared to someone like Quentin Smith. His final perk is Blood Warden. This perk is probably referencing how difficult it is to escape Freddy in the Nightmare on Elm Street films, as most of Quentin and Nancy's friends fall to Freddy throughout the film. The name Blood Warden is probably referencing Freddy's bloody methods of torturing and killing his victims. This is all I can link this one down to, really. Next I'll be looking at Michael Myers or The Shape. Buckle up because I'm going to be talking about Laurie Strode a lot on this one. His first perk is Save the Best for Last. This perk is probably referencing Michael Myers' obsession with Laurie, and how he's saving her for last as he hunts all her friends. However, the icon doesn't seem to be Laurie Strode, which is strange. It could also be some sort of mirrored soul survivor, with the icon art looking similar and both perks centering around others falling first before you or the obsession. This quote from Lumos can be heard here.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
His next perk is Play With Your Food. Again, probably another reference including Laurie. In the icon we see a spider playing with a fly before he eats it. This could be potentially referencing how Michael's victims are like a fly to him, as he is supernaturally strong and intelligent compared to the average human. This quote by Lumos can be heard in this scene here.
You fooled them, haven't you, Michael? but not me.
His last perk is Dying Light. This is another perk that, you guessed it, refers to Laurie Strode. This perk is probably referencing the dying hope of Laurie's friends as more of them fall to Michael Myers. However, the obsession, Laurie Strode, is unaffected, as he is saving the best for last. This quote from Loomis is from this scene.
Man wouldn't do that.
This isn't a man.
Next, I'm going to be looking at the Pig, or Amanda Young, from the Saw films. Her first perk is Surveillance. I believe this perk represents the almost stalking aspect of John Kramer and Amanda Young during Saw. It's known that John Kramer stalks his victims to gain information about their lives, and then later hold it against them. And there are many scenes in Saw where Amanda Young is in somebody's house without them knowing, waiting to strike. This quote from Amanda Young can be heard here in Saw.
Are you gonna behave?
Her next perk is Hangman's Trick. This perk is probably a reference to Amanda's tampering of Saw traps, and now in the entity's realm, she is acutely aware of others tampering with her machinery. The icon and the name with the rope could just be generally referencing Saw traps and their dark nature. This quote from Amanda is from this scene in Saw.
You will keep him alive, whatever it takes. No excuses, no equivocations, no crying.
Her final perk is Make Your Choice. I believe the name of this one is referencing the line that John Kramer repeats throughout the tapes in the Saw movies.
Live or die. Make your choice.
I also believe the icon is referencing a saw trap where you need to add enough weight to the scale to escape. However, in this trap, there were no items except yourself and a hacksaw. I think this perk just generally references the whole choosing between life or death theme in Saw. This quote from Amanda Young is from this scene.
You'd be surprised what tools can save a life.
Next, I'll be looking at Bubba, or the Cannibal, from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. His first perk is Franklin's Demise. This perk is a reference to Franklin Herdesty, a character in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. It most definitely is a reference to when Sally and Franklin encounter Bubba. The quote is from this scene.
Sally, I hear something. Stop! Stop!
His next perk is Barbecue and Chili. This is a reference to the barbecue and chili Leatherface creates using his victims, which he then sells at his gas station, Last Chance Gas. Very disgusting if you ask me. The icon is probably a reference to the ingredients that went into the chili, which was of course, people. It could also just be referencing how you see survivors' auras after hooking someone. This quote from Drayton Sawyer the cook is from this scene.
Just some things you gotta do. Don't mean you have to like it.
His final perk is Knockout. This perk is probably a reference to Bubba's use of his sledgehammer to attack his victims, which he usually does before using his chainsaw to finish him off. I couldn't find anybody that matched the person in the perk icon, so I just believe it's generically referencing Bubba's victims in general. This quote said by Nubbins Sawyer is from this scene.
Oh, that gun's no good.
I was in there once with my uncle.
No way. With a sledge. See, that was better. They died better that way.
The next killer is Pyramid Head, or the Executioner from Silent Hill. His first perk is Force Penance. This perk I believe just represents the Executioner's purpose in Silent Hill, and that was to punish James Sunderland for killing his wife. And now that he's in the entity's realm, he needs to dispense pain to others and punish those who stand in the way of his judgment by inflicting the broken status effect on them. In the icon, we see Pyramid Head picking up someone who seems to be no one specific, so I think it just shows Pyramid Head before hooking somebody in the realm. His next perk is Deathbound. This is an interesting one, as I had to do a bit of digging to try and find out what this means, but I think it just represents how survivors are destined to suffer together while in his grasp in the entity's realm. In the perk icon, we see hands tied together almost like handcuffs, with the iconic barbed wires we see all throughout Silent Hill, as well as in the Pyramid Head's power in Dead by Daylight. His final perk is Trail of Torment. I believe this one is referencing the path of pain and torment we see Pyramid Head's victims, potentially referencing the psychological torment we see James Sunderland put through during the campaign of Silent Hill 2. I believe that his perks are just representations of his purpose to dispense pain and punishment in the entity's realm. I really want to dive deeper into Pyramid Head's perks, but because he's sort of like a punishing machine, there really isn't that much to them. Next up, we have the Nemesis from Resident Evil. His first perk is Eruption. As implied by the perk description, this is a reference to the intelligence given to the Nemesis by the Ni-A parasite. Despite being a biological weapon, he does contain intelligence to use his brute force and set up traps in the entity's realm. This quote from Jill can be heard here.
You can use weapons?
His next perk is Lethal Pursuer. This perk is a reference to how Nemesis was designed to hunt down STARS members and kill anybody who gets in the way. And as a bioweapon, this is quite literally his entire purpose. The quote we see here is Carlos talking about the Nemesis. Its final perk is Hysteria. This perk I believe references the panic and the hysteria the Nemesis causes during Resident Evil. Taking out one teammate weakens and scares the rest. I can't relate the person in the perk icon to anyone specific, but it looks like somebody being panicked and blinded, probably referencing the oblivious status effect a survivors gain from this perk in game. The perk description is referencing the Nemesis's brute strength in general. Next, I'll be looking at the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. The first perk is Jolt, or Surge. This one represents the Demogorgon's interference with nearby technology. It's probably referencing the flickering lights we see in Stranger Things whenever the Demogorgon approaches the characters. We also see how the Upside Down can influence technology in the overworld, with Will Byers being able to communicate with Joyce using Christmas lights. The next perk is Claustrophobia, or Cruel Limits. This perk references the Demogorgon's attachment to the Upside Down and how it assists him while in combat. As implied by the quote from the Hawkins National Laboratory, the Demogorgon is able to affect nearby objects as if they existed in a dimension of their own. This is of course a reference to the Upside Down, which is also prevalent in the entity's realm. The final perk is Fearmonger. This perk is a representation of the distressing atmosphere created by the Demogorgon when nearby is victims. A good example of this is when the Demogorgon is hunting Bob, Hopper and Joyce throughout the Hawkins lab. The Demogorgon has a supernatural and distressing presence, and as the quote implies, feelings of dread and fatigue fill the survivors. Therefore, it creates the exhausted and blindness status effect for survivors in Dead by Daylight. Finally, we have the brand new killer Albert Wesker, or the Mastermind. His first perk is Superior Anatomy. This is a reference to the Ouroboros virus that Albert Wesker has possession of, that provides him with the abnormal superhuman strength, speed, resistance and reaction time. This makes him more deadly than any human. This is clearly seen, especially in the boss fights during Resident Evil 5 with Chris Redfield and Sheva. Next is Awakened Awareness. In the icon we see Albert Wesker with his iconic black sunglasses. This perk is another reference to the Ouroboros and how it heightens his awareness in the battlefield. It could also be referencing his sunglasses, which have been mentioned to contain high-tech augmented reality that help him predict his enemy's next move on the battlefield. And his final perk is Terminus. In the perk icon we see him sitting with the Ouroboros tendrils surrounding him. I believe that this perk is a reference to Albert Wesker's intelligence and how he's a man that prepares for every possible move made by his enemies. His intelligence is also partially because of Ouroboros. This man will not shut up about Ouroboros. It translates into the entity's realm by allowing him to plan ahead when the survivors unlock the exit gates, again referring to him planning for every possibility. That includes losing his prey. And that is going to do it for this video. Let me know what kind of videos you guys want to see next. Consider subscribing, I would really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one, guys.